Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. Thank you very much for taking the time. I appreciate everyone is very busy with the lead up to Christmas, so really appreciate everyone taking the time today to join us. So most of you would probably know TrustWorks for recent award winner of the Picasso for the most impactful data privacy product, also leading AI governance solution. But we also have our community with over 300 valued members. We use a Slack space to share best practices, advice, etc. We have our mentorship program, which is proving extremely successful at the moment. And we also host regular roundtable discussions. So if you are not a member already and would like to join, feel free to reach out to me directly, or there should be a link in the comments below. So today we will be sharing the key takeaways from our most recent conversation, led by Ellie Blore, DPO of Best Companies. Welcome, Ellie.
Thank you.
And Naveed Malik, Group DPO of Informa. Welcome, Naveed.
Thank you. Hi.
Thank you both for taking the time today. Again, I know there's lots of stuff going on for Christmas, so really appreciate you taking the time. And I just also want to give a shout out to Leslie Holmes, DPO of MHR, because she was also a key part in putting together this presentation. She just couldn't be with us on the day. So thank you very much as well, Leslie. So this conversation actually came from a previous roundtable discussion led by Luke Beckley, where we discovered that this was a hot topic, that people were really struggling with the idea of how to ensure they were designing and delivering an effective privacy and data protection training and awareness program. So obviously this is not out of the box. This has to be tailored to the organization. So before we can even begin, we have a bit of homework to do. We need to really understand the business. So we need to know, what types of data are we processing? Is sensitive data involved? Are we talking high-risk processing activities? What regulatory frameworks apply? Are there specific requirements for different departments that we need to take into consideration? What's the culture of the organization? Is it remote? Is it global? Are we all in-house? What's the organization's appetite? Do we have buy-in from leadership, or is it kind of a box-checking exercise? Are the protocols established? Are we setting up new protocols? What's the awareness level in the organization? Are we starting from scratch? Are we building on previous knowledge? What previous training was carried out? And if so, well, how effective was it? What's the percentage of new employees, etc.? So all of this is really going to influence the scope and the type of training that we're going to choose. So Naveed, the ICO stipulates minimum expectations here. And I know you previously worked for the ICO. So maybe you could share with us, what are these expectations that we need to be bearing in mind?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And let me know if there's any issues with my sound.
No, I can hear you perfectly.
Fantastic. Yeah, I spent 5 years at the Information Commissioner, and in that context, you rely tremendously on their guidance and what their expectations are. And so my start point has always been understanding the requirements of any sort of framework, of any sort of program. And so looking at the Information Commissioner, there are 5 elements that are specifically called out, and you can find them on the website. And under each of those 5 is a tremendous amount of very specific objectives and things that they would expect to see. Should they audit you, or if there's elements that they look at as part of their accountability framework. And so those 5 are things I'm sure everybody would be fully aware of and understand. And you've got the all staff training program, so you ensure that your program covers people at all levels, possibly even contingent workers where appropriate. Induction and refresher training, so making a distinction between people who are just joining the business and those that are already there, and maybe there's a difference between the two. Having a clear understanding of specialized roles and tailoring the content specifically to those roles. So, for example, people in HR would have a different expectation in terms of how they manage the data, and therefore the training that they would have for that, than people in, say, a marketing team. One has contact with special category data, another has elements that are relevant to a marketing context, like the privacy and electronic communications regulations, for example. And then you've got monitoring, and that's having an understanding of what the outputs are, the effectiveness, evaluations, testing, so that you understand whether the training itself is actually working. And so there's a lot of requirements that under that. And then finally making a distinction between training and awareness. So
Hmm.
having a mechanism by which what you would look to do is to keep data protection front and center, um, outside of the kind of training environment, like things like posters, emails, newsletters, things of that nature. And so, continually trying to pump that message maybe in, over a calendar year, so that it's something that people are conscious of, they're cognizant of, because generally they're always handling personal data in one way or another, and therefore they
Yeah.
have to think about what impact that would have and how they should look to manage the data in that context. So that awareness raising aspect is really
Mhm.
important. So those are the 5 things, and as I said, there's a tremendous amount under each one, and it's well worth looking at the ICO's guidance to familiarize yourself with those elements.
Excellent. Okay. So that, yeah, that does, I mean, it all makes sense. But obviously, sometimes when you're trying to put together the program, you may not have thought of one or other of those aspects. So now we know about the business, we know where we're starting from, and we know what our minimum expectations are. So now, how do we go about, let's say, putting together this program? How do we ensure it's compliant and successful?
And that's always a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, it very much depends on the business and all of those factors that you talked about at the beginning. But I think having an understanding of what the regulatory requirements are, the and specifically the expectations, that
Mhm.
helps guide you to construct some form of framework that ensures that you can meet all of those expectations, rather than just firefighting through, delivering training when there's a breach, for example, or there's a response that you have to do. Establishing a framework with some clear strategy and values and objectives associated with it, then allows you to create a structure, and then you can look to deliver that over a period of time. And then the challenges in the implementation at all times. And Ellie will talk very nuancedly about that. But if you think of those 5 elements from the ICO, you can build upon that. And so what we've looked to do whenever we've looked to create a training and awareness framework is take some of those elements that from the information commissioner, and kind of develop and further build them out, looking at some of the additional elements. And we use the accountability framework as well that the ICO published,
Mhm.
which sets some clear expectations. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 areas that we've looked at, which should align fully with the ICO's expectations. And that's scope and audience. Again, very similar to all staff training, understanding what your scope of the training is and who you're going to provide training to, roles and responsibilities. So, it's really important that you understand that senior leadership has to have a buy-in, for example, and that responsibility is clearly defined, especially if you have to escalate because people aren't completing training.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. Maybe the DPO has a very specific role as part of that, and they have their own potential training. So the roles and responsibilities are really, really important. And also then the structure of the training. How are you actually going to go about delivering the training? Is it going to be face to face? Is it going to be online? Is it a hybrid version? It depends very much on the business. And again, some of the points that you raised earlier, you have to really sit down and think about, well, what would work effectively for my organization. But you have to ask yourself that question. So having it as one of the key things to address as part of the framework is super important. And
Mhm.
then the evaluation and assessment aspect of it, you have to be able to evaluate the effectiveness of your training. So do you do surveys? Do you get feedback loops? Do you do UX testing? All of these things are really important to look at, so that you can mature your program over time, based on the feedback that you receive. And then the assessment aspect of it is, are you gonna test people into oblivion? Are you gonna set a benchmark for them to get past? Otherwise, they sit on the naughty step and they have to come back around to do it again. Those are the really important questions. Again, has to be, in my mind at least, one of the pillars or the domains of a framework. Um, and then you've got the metrics and reporting, which is really important. the metrics element is your ability to develop the KPIs to demonstrate that things are going well, or there's room for improvement. You may want to be making a case to senior management that they may need to be more investment or things of that nature, or you want to target specific functional areas, business units, because maybe there is the scoring isn't as high as it needs to be. The kind of metrics thing and the reporting element is really fundamental, again, to the maturing piece as well. And speaking of the maturing piece, we've called out continuous improvement as really important. You've got all of this information as part of the framework, the scope, the roles, responsibilities, evaluation, training, all of those elements, and you're gaining a lot of information about the delivery and how it's operating. You've got to take those aspects, and then you have to fold them into your review period in your program, review, and then incrementally improve. And it's important enough in my mind that it's a separate domain. So you have some structure around what continuous improvement looks like, bringing all of that information in that's relevant, feedback and the evaluation, and what people are saying about how the training is operating. And then you refine the delivery. If you're working on a calendar period, you refine it for the next year's deployment or the following year's deployment, or you do your spot training where you need to. And it's important that you show that, because it is quite an important preventative and remediation action for breach situations, for example, to be able to talk about training. It's heavily relied upon as a mechanism to reduce risks for the business. So that continuous improvement process means that you're lowering the risk as you go on. So you can't keep it static. It's got to keep improving year on year. So I think that those are the key elements. And there's a wealth of stuff that sits underneath each of those domains that I mentioned. But I like to start high and move down.
Yeah, but as you said, this is essentially a live project. It's not a one-off, put together the framework and carry it out. It has to continue to evolve with the organization, evolve based on the feedback, as you say, the experience, what's happening. Do we need to pivot? Do we need to evolve? Can we continue to repeat this, etc.?
And content changes, right? The sands shift, right? At all times, and so you need to ensure that you're covering all the bases, and there are things that will happen within the organization that will show that there's some elements that have to be focused on. You need to collect the information around those things and then fold those in so that you're addressing them appropriately going forward, especially in the breach context. It's super important that you're addressing those things, and the continuous improvement is important. And so it doesn't become static. You're absolutely right. It's a live activity. It keeps going, as any operational process should be doing year on year.
Yeah, I think it's important what you said there, actually, the fact that there are changes happening, let's say, but from both perspectives, from the regulatory side of things, but also internally in the organization. The organization is live also, and it's continuously evolving and changing. So it's important that the homework we did at the beginning, let's say, of understanding the business where it's at, it's not going to be the same in 6 months or a year's time. So we need to be continuously monitoring that aspect as well to know where do we need to adapt.
You've got to keep your fingers on the pulse with senior leaders in the business, and especially functional areas around what their challenges are from a privacy perspective, the information that's coming in, and then the general strategy of the business as well, which direction it's going in. M&A is mergers and acquisitions is a big factor in Informa. You can just read any of the press, and so that becomes a real issue, like due diligence with new organizations. That's a particular focus. So it's important to keep your fingers on the pulse and understand the direction of travel, and make sure that your program is responsive to that, flexible enough and responsive to that. And again, that continuous engagement and review allows you to or enables that process to occur.
Yeah, excellent. And Ellie, I know I've seen numerous posts recently about the success of your privacy training awareness program within best companies. So what is the secret sauce? What tips or insights can you share with us?
Yeah, thank you. So I think for me, everything starts with the culture of your organization. So your senior management team, your leadership team, they will have spent a small fortune on trying to influence the type of culture that they want at your organization, the purpose of you operating, your principles, your values. And you basically want to lean into that. You don't want to be pulling the organization away from what has been established and where they are trying to evolve and mature the culture of the organization. So leaning into that, I think, is the start of that. And when you get into the culture aspects of what your organization is trying to do, what they won't be trying to do is create a negative culture. So you need to tie in your training to be aligned with that. And it needs to be beyond awareness. What you're actually trying to implement as your training strategy evolves is behavioral change. So you want, as Naveed was saying, about in continuous improvement. So looking to find ways of not trying to trip people up, being generous when they get it right. What you don't want to be doing is punishing them with more training if they haven't met your threshold. What I think where we look at is that there isn't a pass and fail in terms of what we're broadcasting back to people. Where people aren't necessarily scoring as high we would like to, or hopefully they're continually improving, so we're lifting the bar in terms of the level of expectation. It's metrics back to us as the coaches trying to help them improve their departments. So it's a pinpoint to us to say that training didn't land, rather than just sending back feedback on how was the training, how did I present it, how colourful or bright were the slides, how engaging was the material. Actually what matters is the knowledge test afterwards, actually looking to see where those gaps are. So that way then you can look to further evolve your training. Actually, death by power slides often here hasn't actually worked. What else can we do? How else can we get the message across? Really thinking about, Naveed's already spoken about switching the material up so that it's not the same delivery. But that is so important. You don't want to be delivering the same training to your cleaners on how to send an email through an encrypted process. You don't want to be telling your product managers to spend extra time looking through bins just in case there's any accidental sensitive material being thrown away inappropriately. So really trying to deliver the different messages where they are key. So individuals within the organization can really understand how knowing a little bit of data protection can actually make a positive influence within the role they're actually doing. Because I know we don't like to hear it, but other people don't enjoy data protection quite the same way as what those in field do. Yeah, I know, it's really surprising. I think I was blown away when so it's like I got put onto snooze once on LinkedIn because it was just too much data protection is the feedback I got. So so trying to find little wins in what you're trying to do, but actually trying to move with the culture of the organization rather than create your own mini subculture of how you want to be effective, really.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, just when you're talking about the different types of activities, like the entire educational world has evolved to this idea of, it's not about, even in like from preschool and primary school and secondary, it's not about kids sitting down and like repeating exercises, looking at the board and copying it down. It all has evolved completely, and it's all about positive feedback and motivation. And it's funny to think we're talking about grown adults here, but it's the same concept. It's like, we're all human at the end of the day, and we're not going to be motivated by sitting looking at a PowerPoint and click, repeat, yes, no. Like, we do have to change it up and make it interesting and fun and motivating.
Yeah, that's it. We have to constantly be looking for ways in order to support people be better in what they do, not just delivering the same message every year as a refresher in terms of, what it is. And I think it's also being humble with people as well. I mean, everybody potentially has the possibility of sending an email to the wrong person. It's the importance is actually understanding how that happened and why it happened and what you can do in order to stop that again. So again, it's thinking about your language and how you are portraying where there is a security incident or there is a data breach. It's not blaming the individual and not trying to put a blame culture across. It's, people often talk about human error and people being the weakest link, but Actually, it's not. We use the 5 whys methodology in terms of our incident investigation. So, what we will actually go back to looking at, actually, was it a training? Is it a lack of training issue? Is it a resource issue? Is there just not enough staff? Are people on holiday and then people have gone off sick and they're just trying to do too much? Is there a process failure? Is something broken or something down and they've had to create something that takes them as a wrap around normal operating procedures, and they've just had to make a decision and move it, and actually that's what's caused the issue? Or are they doing something they don't normally do? Are they doing something bespoke? Or that, just because they can't say no, they say going, oh yeah, we'll do that, and they've just done it a different way. So trying to find the learning outcome of what caused that, and then looking to see what safety guards or rails that you can put in place because if one person's done it, then somebody else could potentially do it. So it's really important to sort of really understand and have that training put across that if there is an issue, you can raise it. We're not going to come at you. We've all made mistakes. It's understanding how that mistake occurred and what the learning opportunities are in order for you to improve. And then you can also use that information to inform your future trainings as well. So to sort of step up and try to educate people in a way that actually, again, is meaningful and moves the culture of the organisation.
Exactly. So I suppose on that note, when it comes to, you're doing everything right in theory, you've followed your framework and you've done your homework and the business, the organization, what's expected, etc. And you're carrying out your training and your awareness. How do you know if it's being effective? Like what kind of things should we be looking at or evaluating to know just how effective our training program is?
Yeah, no, I think metrics are really important. I know Naveed touched on them before, but it also came up in the roundtable. And I genuinely think a lot of the time we are looking at the wrong metrics in sector. We are looking at how many people clicked on the link. Why are we looking at that? That's not what we're training people on. We're training people to follow a process, to not click on it. So why aren't we looking to see who followed the process to reporting the fish when you've run a phishing simulation? Those sorts of things where you've got visitor policies in place. How effective is your visitor policy? How many, who's booked in to come into the building? How many of them have actually, what percentages? And then you can build your metrics off there in terms of your KPIs, in terms of what good looks like, what really good looks like. And you know what? If the first time you do it, and you find nobody is reporting your phishing simulations, nobody is walking around with a visitor's pass, everybody's just like carrying on as if it's a coffee shop. So then you can start working on it, but give yourself meaningful targets. Don't pick a target that's unreachable or achievable, so it looks and feels like you're constantly failing. Give yourself meaning objectives. Say, right, only 5% is where we're at in terms of the company. So move it to 10% and work to get into that within the next 3 months, within the next 6 months. Look at your training program in terms of where you're reeling out and what is a realistic target for you to hit to be able to demonstrate that improvement. So they're the sorts of things. Look, what processes are actually important to you? What are you actually training people on? What do you want them to do in terms of those behavioural processes? And that's what you need to be looking at in terms of your measure. And then that way it can also look to work for your data subject requests, your incidents. I don't want to get to a percentage of 0 incidents because I want people to be reporting their near misses. So then I can look to try and find ways of safeguarding those. So again, with the data subject requests, if you are getting a lot of them or they're coming in peaks and troughs, trying to understand how and why they are coming in. What's the recurring themes? Are there a certain type of newsletter going out or that was unexpected or about something different that you need to go and speak to the team about and go, right, what's going on here? What's recently going out? We're getting loads of erasure requests or objection to being contacted. Where's that coming from? What's generating that? Let's relook at what we're doing. So there's lots of really valuable metrics that you can actually get and towards informing your training in order to ensure that it is moving in the right direction, which then actually reflects onto the organizational health. which will then give you buy-in to your senior management team, because effectively that's what they're there to ensure.
Yeah, I think something else that came up at the roundtable as well was it partly links into the feedback loop thing we talked about earlier on. So if we're carrying out the training and everyone appears to be following and everything appears to be fine and nobody's asking questions, we assume it's working. But it's when people actually engage more and start to question things, that's when we really realize that it's working. So it's not going to happen initially, I'm sure, but over time we should start to see that people across the business do start to question things and not just take it as this is what I'm supposed to do. And that is not a bad thing. They're not trying to cause a problem. They're not causing an obstacle, but they're showing us, okay, people are actually engaging. They are actually listening. They are actually starting to form an opinion. So we should see it as a positive thing and listen and see what they have to say.
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned before about, look at the knowledge tests in terms of the where your gaps are, or where the lack of reporting is, or where your spikes are in terms of the reporting that's come in. Those metrics are for you. They're not for punishing other people to do the same thing over again. It's like constantly failing your driving test. You need to find ways of, especially more and more organizations, we're moving towards trying to be inclusive in terms of our workspaces. We want people to come in from different diverse backgrounds. What works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for someone else. So sitting somebody in front of the module every quarter where they're just watching something, it's not enough. And then, so perhaps looking towards your sales team, looking at role play exercises, things that are fun, that, the gamification of products, that, there's loads of stuff out there. And leaning it into sort of that personal growth, and having data protection or privacy champions within departments, within teams, who can pass on their learning to people within their departments, and actually feel like they are taking a little bit more of responsibility to signpost to resources. It's all stuff that can really sort of tie in and help other people in because people care about what they do. They care about doing a good job. So if they see it as part of their job, not just something mandatory that's being forced upon them, and following up with non-mandatory training as well, providing those optional training. How many of your workforce are turning up to the optional ones? That's the buy-in. If they are sensing the need and go, actually, that will be really beneficial for me to be able to see how that works. Or if you're having those sort of meet and greet meetups and say, I'm trying to be better informed on a new process we want to put in. This is the sort of thing that are going to be impacted. Come and have your say, or send a person from your department to be represented within that group. They can make a really positive influence because people feel like they've contributed to the processes and policies.
Exactly. And I know you mentioned their role playing, for example, and the variety, etc. And it is something I think that has come up. Well, it came up in this roundtable and in the previous one. So not everyone is as creative and, has the time and energy to invest in different ideas. And I think it's important to be able to share the wealth. So can you share some resources or some particular type of activities that you have felt have shown the best results, let's say?
Free resources out there. You don't have to go back and ask your organisation to spend a load of money in order to be able to enhance your privacy framework. So our data protection champions, we ask them to do the Open University Introduction to Cybersecurity, which is a really, really good free resource. It's a really good comprehensive foundation level. It's 8 modules, with a lovely certificate at the end that they can post onto LinkedIn with a lovely badge, because who doesn't like a badge, to go through. But it gives them that sort of base layer and a little bit more than just data protection. It gives them more awareness. But then, you might have your coders and your product team and people wanting to actually learn more about the security aspects in terms of actually how are they doing a better job securing your web applications, in which case there's the likes of Try Hack Me and OWASP have got a number of applications like Juice Shop or WebGo. And the National Cybersecurity Centre. If you have no training at all in your organisation, go to the National Cybersecurity Centre website. They've got a top tips for staff which you can either reutilize and share as is, or you can start to try and create your own off the back of it. But it'll give you that little bit more of a feel to get the slides. And then, of course, there's applications such as like Kahoot, where you can just have a fun quiz and throw some different process things in and look at. So there are lots and lots of resources out there. You don't have to necessarily go for the paid ones, which of course they are, and there are very good ones. One of the other things that we do is we also bring consultants in, because as much as I'm sure everybody loves seeing my face and loves hearing my voice all of the time, sometimes it's nice to bring somebody else to reaffirm what you're saying, and also just give them a different experience. I mean, we've had Tim Turner come into the Officer from 2040 training, delivering PECA training to our marketing teams. It allows them to have a different conversation with somebody else, ask questions, and then you can support that understanding after that training in terms of trying to sort of just, see how they engage with it. It's always good to, I think, to keep mixing it up in fun, engaging ways.
As they say, variety is the spice of life.
Absolutely.
And then, so those resources and tips that you shared were more from a training perspective, and then from an awareness perspective, anything you can share?
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's in terms of just ensuring that you're doing the right thing. Is that what you mean by ensuring, measuring the awareness aspects, or just being showcased?
No, how? What ideas can we use for improving the awareness across the organisation on top of the training, obviously? On top of the training,
so as Naveed said eearlier, that you can have the posters in the tea rooms and things like that. You can use the your screensavers. I know Leslie was quite keen that she's got menu boards on her tables with additional trainings and themes and things. It's just trying to find ways of making it fun and interesting, and providing that message in different ways in order to be able to support that, really.
Yeah, and I suppose when it comes to the posters, we're not necessarily talking about your standard informative poster, but maybe let's try and do something a bit quirky that stops people to go, hang on, what? Do you know what I mean? If you do something strange, it'll make someone stop and actually read it. So I think it's important to maybe think of what's in the poster, not just, I put a poster there, does nobody see it?
Yeah, that's it. It is trying to make people look at something and think about something in different ways. There's thinking of, so there's also quite good in terms of activities as well that you can potentially do. I mean, you've heard of escape rooms. There's cyber escape rooms now where you can have backpack activities where people have got to get into the backpack and steal the password, and basically it will unlock the laptop eventually, and that's sort of showing you how easy it potentially is to go and get onto people's socials and hack people's social sites and things like that. There's also sort of the awareness piece in terms of QR codes and things like that, having those available on posters, or just discreetly sort of distributed about, free streaming for life and things like that you hear about, having people scan codes and start entering their personal data of, who your best friend was in school, what your first pet was, what your mother's maiden name is, see how much they can go before they're like, oh, this feels like I'm giving up an awful lot of information here for something I'm hoping to get at the end of it. With some sort of submit button or something like that at the end that wipes the form and kind of delivers that little bit of what would be error message. I'm sure you can have some fun with some of your in-house design people for designing a web page or something like that, in order to try and find other ways of delivering those messages, because the more meaningful it is, the more people connect with it, then the greater chance you have got of the behavioral change.
Yeah, no, definitely. No, 100%. And thank you. So I think I'm conscious of time. I think we're kind of up on time. We could talk about this all day, but I think we're going to have to call it a halt. So thank you so much, Ellie and Naveed, for joining me today. And thank you to everybody else who took the time to watch today, or was going to watch this at some point after the recording is live. If anybody would like to receive links to the resources that we mentioned, please feel free to reach out. Happy to share them. Or if anybody has other resources that we didn't mention, or any ideas that you would like to share, please do. It's all about sharing the wealth, collaborating, because again, it does have to be tailored to your organization, but it's great to get different ideas and think, okay, I'm going to tweak that this way and that way. So please feel free to share. It would be great. And if you haven't already joined the community, as I mentioned before, there should be a link in the comments for you to join. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for taking the time today. A very Merry Christmas to you both and to everybody else at home. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.